Hey, it's Dew, and I'm here with my cafe latte regular from 7-Eleven in Tokyo. And since my embarkment a few days ago, given the travel time, the 10-hour flight, the several-hour journey from Narita into Tokyo, etc. The insomnia is what I get when I get jet lag, is insomnia. I finished 3 books, and they are fundamentally by Nuseba Yosin. You Can Go Home Now by Michael Elias, and just currently finishing up Nesting by Rosine O'Donnell. So, should I say a little about Tokyo first? I had been to Japan before 20 years ago. My debit card had expired, and I didn't think to look at the expiration date as I was living in South Korea at the time, and it was my American debit card. And so I showed up in Japan, I got some money out, and then, you know, within a budget, whatever, and I brought some Korean won over with me. But like the next time I needed money, I couldn't use my debit card, it was expired. So I basically I had a return ticket on the ferry, but I basically kind of stranded myself a bit in Japan. I had to make some decisions around having very, very limited, if not no, I was able to borrow a little money, but yeah, it put a damper or an interesting spin on that trip. What I remember about Japan from that time, and this was the south of Japan, was that there were public showers. So I slept in a park and showered. And then you could get like anything from a vending machine and or 7-Eleven. So from nostalgia, I've only been in Tokyo a couple of days, and I mean, as kind of a foodie, and certainly with a lot more affluence than no money at all, can afford to eat out. I've just only eaten at the 7-Eleven. It's good. It's, I mean, excellent food, no, but good food, right? I picked some salads yesterday, and the night I arrived, I was kind of late, and I just wasn't late. I was just tired after a really long trip, and I picked I think some noodles, and brought them into, so this is where I'm staying for the last couple days. It's like a little micro studio apartment. It's called Art Hotel Shibuya, and I can't say enough good things about it. I love this little, I wouldn't even call it a hotel room. It's more like a little apartment. It's got a washer, it's got a cooker, it's got a fridge and a microwave. So anything that you would need. So enough about Tokyo or Japan. Let's talk about the books. The theme running across all of these books they're very much a feminist, humanist theme, in that when you live in a patriarchy, a misogynistic patriarchy, which is the condition under which most women in this world live, you are vulnerable in a lot of ways. And it's very easy for you to make decisions that others would judge you by, like staying with an abusive partner, and or in the case of fundamentally joining, maybe with some naivete, a group, a terrorist group, because you're vulnerable, in some ways easy to influence, but certainly easy to exploit. And your recourses to get out once you're into situations such as marriage are very limited. So fundamentally, I'm like, fundamentally, and You Can Go Home Now were both written in the first person. I'm finding myself more and more critical kind of a first person narrative. I think it's a bit of an audacious thing for an author to do. And sometimes maybe the reason, like for instance, in Fundamentally, I didn't like Nadia. I thought she was spoiled and not complex and self-absorbed. And maybe part of that is because when we get all of her inner workings, well, it's really easy to judge humans. Like, we are all really flawed. And maybe that's why Jonas decided to do that with this character. Not liking Nadia didn't impact the book. I thought the book still had a lot of really great parts to it. So if you're unfamiliar, Fundamentally is about a British woman who's working for the UN. She has a PhD in de-radicalization. And so she goes to Iraq to work with former ISIS brides who are imprisoned in a camp there to try a program of de-radicalization to see if they could repatriate. This author really did do that work, however, not with foreign-born women, as they weren't actually stationed, they're not housed, incarcerated in Iraq. It's in Syria, and she made the choice to write about Iraq, about which she's more familiar, and the social-political situation, the political situation when she was writing, these are her words in the author's note, in Syria was really complex, and she didn't know if she had the best understanding of it to be brave enough to write that setting. So she, you know, it's a work of fiction, and she's very honest that, like, where she did work with ISIS brides, they were Iraqi, and in the book she writes about foreign-born ones. And, you know, there was just a lot to unpack about this book. She ends up smuggling someone, you know, someone who's born in the East End of London out into Turkey, reuniting this woman with her daughter. And I think that action was questionable for a lot of reasons. Smuggling is quite dangerous, not to say the least, but also the one thing but Nadia in her first person narrative does is sort of repeats the same sort of self-loathing. She's also just nasty to people. But in one of her sort of like stream of consciousness, she's like, why did I help this? Why did this woman's life matter more to me than all of the other women, Iraqi included? And so I think that was probably the most compelling introspection of the book. I thought that where it raised a lot of awareness about the UN. I think there's some criticism about the UN and international UNing, politicking, and also definitely explained how women got themselves, young teenage girls got themselves into these situations in a lot of the cases that she was exploring. It's kind of meant to be satirical, and I think it did work a little bit. It was a little bit funny. In some ways, it was like too cliche to be funny for me, but I found myself finding it somewhat witty at some times too. I know, definitely worth reading. So also following those themes, You Can Go Home Now is a suspense. It follows the main character who, oh my gosh, I just finished the book and I'm the name, I know at the end her undercover name's Lucy. For some reason that's sticking in my mind. Anyway, Nina, I think her name's Nina. She's a cop. Her father was assassinated by extremist pro-lifer because her father was a doctor. So this book takes us through sort of a women's rights perspective, written by a white male, and I think middle-aged or older male. And why is that important? I mean, again, we get into this who's telling whose stories and how well they're doing it. I thought that Michael Elias did a really reasonable job. I think it is always worth, speculating what somebody else's life might be like. Again, he chose to write a woman in the first person. However, I mean, just because I experienced it right after reading Fundamentally, which was a woman who really experienced some of what she was writing about, like the nuances were very noticeable. That where Michael Elias was hitting it, sometimes he was really missing it other times. And there were sometimes his sort of stereotypical thinking, especially about women other than white women, our cultures other than sort of like middle or East Coast white America, was like cringy. Also, where I really like the premise of the book. So there's a shelter for women that when women can escape, basically this shelter's operation is to assassinate the men before they are able to murder their partners or wives. And I'm not for vigilante. However, as this is a suspense book, and also like really looking through the lens of, if you have no way to escape, what can you do? I mean, what can be done? I liked the premise, but the book had big and small flaws and holes, like plot holes. There were some things that you're just like, man, I mean, just even maybe a little bit of a better edit would have caught that. Like, that's just ridiculous. It didn't even line up, and it just run like one scenario right next to the other. So it was a decent read. I thought it was really interesting to read, squished in between Fundamentally and Nesting, which again is about a woman. It's told actually in the third person, and its nuances are excellent. It's like, as far as nuances go, and this is probably my favorite of these three reads, the inner workings of this woman who's been gaslit, who doesn't trust herself, who has children she needs to take care of, and who's being abused, albeit not physically. However, the threat is very much there. It's very real. And this enormous amount of emotional abuse has really worn her down and worn her confidence down. And how this book handles that sort of loop that she gets caught in, I think, was like thinking of how in Fundamentally that Nadia gets caught in loops too. And sometimes I'm just annoyed. I'm just like every chapter is just going to be this like rerun. Whereas in Nesting, when she gets caught kind of in a loop, it's done in a way that's very real about, I mean, this is what's happening. This is the process. Like, you try to get out, and then your own mind reacts to all of the pressures of society. This woman feels joy and then feels a lot of the woman in Nesting, the main character in Nesting. And then she feels a lot of guilt for even feeling joy. And the way that the male perpetrator, her husband, whose name is Brian, his character is just so well written. He's just absolutely monstrous. To me, or any reader that's familiar with emotional abuse,